Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're opening up a stack of sources that really challenge every conventional rule about power, status, and influence.
Yeah, they definitely do.
If you've ever felt kind of exhausted by that constant chase for recognition, well, this deep dive is definitely for you. We are dissecting a fascinating, almost countercultural framework, servant leadership. It's based heavily on Chris R. Velazquez's book, Lead Low, Rise High.
Right, mastering servant leadership influence from the inside out.
Exactly. And this isn't just about, being nice. It's a pretty radical thesis.
Yeah.
It centers on the idea that genuine lasting influence actually comes from humility and, maybe surprisingly, dependence.
Profound dependence, yeah.
So our mission today is to really unpack this core claim, which feels like a paradox, right?
Yeah.
That true sustainable influence isn't found in self-promotion or climbing the ladder,
Not in grabbing status.
but in radical self-surrender.
Mm-hmm.
Choosing to lead low, as the book says, so you can rise high in terms of real impact, legacy, character.
It's an immediate gut check, isn't it, against how we normally think. The world basically tells us influence is, a zero-sum game. It's measured by titles, visibility, control.
Yeah.
But this framework flips that. It says humility isn't a weakness, it's not a liability. It's actually the most strategic and spiritually powerful form of leadership there is.
Okay.
It really forces you to confront the cost of ego versus, the long-term payoff of dependence.
Let's unpack that tension right away, because it sounds completely backwards, doesn't it?
It does initially, yeah.
If I choose to lead low-prioritized service, admit I need help, be vulnerable, aren't I just setting myself up to be overlooked? Or worse, maybe exploited?
That's the natural fear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How does giving up power actually lead to gaining influence? That's the paradox.
The book tackles this head on. It calls it the paradox of true influence. And the argument is that real, durable influence comes through what the sources call Christ-centered humility.
Okay, Christ-centered humility.
And it's not just putting on a humble face. It's not superficial modesty. It's described as an internal renovation.
An inner posture.
Exactly. An inner posture that changes everything. How you think, how you make decisions, moving you from ego and dominance towards service, and crucially, dependence on a higher purpose.
Dependence again.
Yeah. The foundational idea here is modeled on the ancient concept of kenosis.
Kenosis. Okay, what's that?
It basically means intentional self-emptying. So, consciously giving up status, relinquishing your rights, you could say, for the sake of serving others.
Like in Philippians, the Christ example.
Precisely. That's the ultimate model presented. The idea that true greatness isn't found in being served, but in serving.
But there's a promise attached.
Yes. The promise is long-term vindication, that the influence you don't grasp for through self-promotion will eventually be granted to you because of your character, your integrity.
So it's not passive at all, it's active. It's choosing strength through self-control, maybe.
That's a great way to put it. And the sources use some powerful historical examples to show this isn't about being weak-willed. It's conviction paired with humility.
Like Moses.
Yeah.
The sources mention him being described as, the most humble man on earth.
Right. Numbers 12.3. Very humble, more than all people. Yet, look at how he led, with immense, unwavering conviction.
Yeah, definitely not passive.
Exactly. Humility doesn't mean you lack boldness. It means you know the source of your strength isn't just you.
And Paul too, right?
Look at Paul. Yeah, huge influence. But he openly talked about his weaknesses, even boasted in them. Why? To show that God's power was perfected in those limits.
Okay.
So the book argues this combination, humility, conviction, and dependence, is basically the ultimate formula for resilience. It's theological, ethical, and practical.
How practical?
Well, think about it. A leader operating from humility isn't driven by performance anxiety or that constant need to prove themselves.
Like sense less ego involved?
Yeah, right. So they make better decisions, they're less defensive when they get criticized, and they tend to build organizations that are just fundamentally healthier because the culture shifts from control to contribution.
Okay, and that feels like where the source material really shifts from the what to the how. Most leadership books focus on the external skills, communication, strategies.
Yeah, all that.
But Velazquez pivots. He focuses almost entirely on inner transformation. How does he actually guide leaders through that? It sounds hard.
It is hard work, but he argues the internal shift is what unlocks everything else. And it's defined by embracing 4 core postures. These aren't skills you just perform. They're states of being you have to cultivate daily.
4 postures. Okay, what's the first one?
The first one is foundational. Dependence over self-sufficiency.
Break that down. What does that look like when I show up at the office on Monday morning.
It means admitting you have limits. It's actively seeking direction, getting input, not just from your usual team, but from people on the front lines, from mentors, maybe from your spiritual compass if you have one.
So saying, I don't know.
Basically, yes, it's a confession that you don't have all the answers, which paradoxically makes people trust you more, not less.
Okay.
Leaders who think they're totally self-sufficient, they're eventually going to overestimate their own abilities and take dumb risks. Dependence is a check on that.
Right. Okay, posture 1, dependence. What's next?
The second flows right from it. Service over status.
Okay.
This shifts the whole goal. Leadership isn't about collecting titles anymore. It's about prioritizing the flourishing, the growth of the people you lead.
So your success is measured differently.
Exactly. The book introduces this idea of a service impact scorecard. When you start defining your success by how you help others grow, you naturally become less defensive about your own status. It just matters less.
That would definitely lower the pressure a lot of leaders feel, that constant performance anxiety.
It links directly to the third posture, identity in Christ over achievement. Or, if you're not coming from that specific faith background, maybe identity and purpose over achievement.
Finding worth beyond the metrics.
Precisely. It's a huge psychological buffer. Finding your core worth in your ultimate purpose, not just the temporary titles or numbers the organization gives you.
Because those can disappear overnight.
Totally. When achievement is your entire identity, you're incredibly fragile. This framework aims to help leaders let go of that performance-driven anxiety so they lead from abundance, not fear.
Makes sense. Okay. That's 3. Dependence, service, identity. What's the 4th? This feels like the toughest one for a business setting.
It probably is. It's courageous vulnerability.
Ooh, yeah. Vulnerability. How does that play out?
This is where that inner work creates really tangible team benefits. Courageous vulnerability means things like confessing mistakes quickly, inviting real accountability, not just pretending to.
Owning it.
Owning it. And leading with grace when things go wrong, instead of defensiveness or blame. Strategically, this is huge because it builds psychological safety.
How so?
Well, if the leader admits they messed up, it empowers everyone else. People feel safer to innovate, to try things, even to dissent, knowing that mistakes are treated as learning opportunities, not career enders.
So humility actually fuels innovation.
That's the argument. It becomes the engine.
I really appreciate that this framework doesn't just say, be humble. It gives actual systems to help you stay humble, which is crucial, right?
Absolutely.
For you listening, always looking for those high-impact, actionable tools, the source material emphasizes specific, measurable ways to implement this. It's one thing to admire humility, quite another to audit your own pride. How does it suggest we do that?
And this is where Vilas' method really stands out, I think. It takes that internal posture and makes it externally trackable, because if you don't measure it, you probably won't maintain it.
Right. So let's detail a few. The sources list several tools. First up, the humility log. What is that, actually?
Okay, a humility log is basically a reflective exercise. Maybe daily, maybe weekly. The leader reviews their interactions, their decisions, and specifically looks for moments where they chose self-promotion over service, or maybe where they should have sought advice but didn't.
Like a self-check.
Yeah, structured self-examination. It's designed to surface that hidden pride, keep self-awareness sharp.
Okay, that sounds useful, if maybe a little painful. What else?
And another really interesting one is the dependence map.
Dependence map.
Yeah. Leaders, especially in high-control settings, often feel they have to be the center of everything, the main hub for all decisions.
The bottleneck sometimes.
Exactly. The dependence map makes you actively chart out where you're seeking input, advice, accountability, who are you relying on. It forces you to visualize that support network.
So it makes interdependence visible, measurable.
Yeah. Right. The opposite of self-sufficiency becomes a deliberate process.
That's clever. The sources also mention a pride audit and that service impact scorecard. How do those fit together?
Well, the pride audit is about facing that ego head-on. Identifying patterns. Are you defensive? Do you grab credit? Are you afraid to delegate meaningful work?
Ouch. Okay.
And the service impact scorecard is kind of the positive flip side. It's the metric that shifts your focus. Success isn't how much you own or control, but how many lives you're actually serving and transforming through your leadership.
So you might track, like, time spent mentoring versus time spent managing up.
Something like that, yeah. If your scorecard shows, say, 90% of your energy goes to maintaining your status and only 10% to empowering others, well, you've got a clear, objective signal that something's off balance.
Gotcha.
All these tools, they're designed to help manage success without letting it turn into arrogance and handle criticism without becoming insecure. They shift a leader from seeing influence as something they own, like a personal trophy,
Right.
to seeing it as something they steward, a trust, maybe even a divine trust, depending on your worldview.
Stewardship, not ownership.
The moment you see influence as stewardship, you naturally treat your team, your organization with more care, more generosity. It changes the motivation.
That idea, stewardship versus ownership, feels like a perfect bridge to our final section. Applying this lead low idea to the modern world, especially the digital attention economy.
Oh, yeah, that's a huge challenge.
Right, because the modern world rewards spectacle, noise, viral visibility. How can humility possibly compete online?
The sources draw a really stark contrast here. It's visibility without depth versus influence-rooted independence.
Okay.
Digital platforms, they thrive on instant engagement, shock value, spectacle, clicks. The book warns that when visibility becomes the main goal, the leader's identity gets really vulnerable. It gets tied to follower counts, likes.
And that's fragile ground.
Super fragile. That kind of digital success, if it's just fueled by ego and spectacle, it's shallow. It often collapses fast when a real crisis hits.
So what's the alternative? Hiding.
No, not hiding. Belasis argues that humility is actually the superior strategic edge online.
Yeah.
Because it builds trust. And trust, the book argues, is the durable capital online. Algorithms can mimic popularity, they can boost visibility for a moment, but they cannot mimic genuine authenticity, vulnerability shown over time, or real consistency.
Okay, so digital humility isn't about being invisible. It's about how you use the platform you have.
Exactly.
So what does that look like practically? Online humility in action.
It looks like consistent generosity, publicly elevating others, shining the spotlight on your team members instead of just yourself.
Giving credit away.
Giving credit away, yeah. It means public confession when you get something wrong, which is incredibly rare online, right?
Almost unheard of.
And it requires a kind of stubborn devotion to truth and service, rather than just chasing whatever narrative is trending or jumping on the outrage bandwagon for clicks.
That sounds harder, but maybe more sustainable.
That's the idea. This countercultural approach, where the leader intentionally decreases so others can increase the sources, argue it results in deeper engagement, higher retention, and builds a much more resilient community around you or your brand.
Because there's trust there.
Exactly. When a crisis inevitably hits, the humble leader, the one who's already shown vulnerability and a service mindset, has this reservoir of trust to draw on. The self-promoting leader, they often just have their own defenses.
It really is the long game of influence, built on character, not just fleeting optics.
Precisely. Character outlasts clicks.
Wow. This has been a really illuminating deep dive. We've explored a framework that completely recalibrates how we might define leadership success.
It really does.
The core takeaway from Lead Low, Rise High, it seems, is that true, lasting influence isn't built on force or ego. It's built on humility, sustained by dependence on purpose, on character, maybe on God.
It shifts leadership from accumulation to stewardship, shared power.
Yeah. And if we connect this back to the bigger picture, this kind of leadership, it doesn't just change organizations. It seems like it changes motives.
It transforms motives, yeah. It deepens relationships. And it creates these ripple effects that genuinely outlast titles and awards and, all the temporary stuff.
It feels like a powerful blueprint for leading with real conviction, but also compassion and resilience.
Conviction, compassion, resilience. That sums it up nicely.
So for you, the person listening right now, seeking that actionable knowledge, if leadership really is fundamentally stewardship rather than ownership, what's one system, one tool, maybe something simple like starting a humility log or even just sketching out your own dependence map? What could you implement this week?
Just one small step.
Yeah, just one thing to start measuring your success, not just by the titles you earn, but by the actual tangible impact you have on the lives you serve and maybe help transform. Something to think about as you go out there and maybe find the power in leading low.